The following review is intended for entertainment purposes and targeted for adult fans of the series.
You see, Camo is second, Incisor is first. Welcome to the Quarter Mark, heroes. I'm the Orange Ranger, and welcome to another Kamen Rider Dragon Knight episode review. Last time, Kit finally learned the truth about Drew, the devious Kamen Rider Torque. Camo was vented, but Thrust is still out there, and the audience knows that the snake-like strike is waiting in the wings as well. Let's take a look at the 10th episode of Kamen Rider Dragon Knight, Battle Club.
Please make sure you're subscribed to the channel.
Yeah, and make sure you got your notifications set up by hitting that little bell icon.
Right you. What he said was, you can consider checking us out on Patreon or Ko-fi at Orange Ranger Videos.
After a somewhat shorter preview segment, we see Thrust emerge from a car window back onto Earth and transform back into a motocross rider. And apparently that was all the prelude we needed for the theme song. After Let's Ride, the man starts having a flashback, and just to kick a little bit more dirt on Grant Staley, one of the first things we hear is the man's name, Brad Barrett. The flashback is a motocross race, and listen, I know that I am the famed nitpicker of the TokuTuber community, but I have two big problems with this flashback. Number one, we're hearing the announcer of this race as they're calling the race. But this is Brad's flashback. Even if that announcer were talking over the arena's PA system and not on television, there's no way he would have been able to hear them. Two, watching this motocross footage, it's very clear that it wasn't staged for the episode. It's just random motocross footage that they threw a filter over to try to hide that fact. At one point, they say that Brad is in first, very closely racing with another of the racers, and you see two racers that are very close to each other with someone jumping a hill ahead of both of them. The riders also change colors of uniforms between various shots. It's not great, but yes, it is minor. Another rider, the one that Brad is neck and neck with, Joe something, is about to overtake Brad, but then he loses control of his bike and Brad's winning streak continues. However, after the race, in a trailer, a man who's either Brad's manager or the racing circuit's manager says that Brad has been accused of sabotaging Joe's bike. He even shows him security footage of a man wearing Brad's custom jacket messing with the bike. Brad insists he didn't do it, but the man says that Brad just loves to win. Maybe just a little too much this time. Joe isn't pressing charges, probably because Brad mentions that the two of them are bros, but the man asks for the prize money back and says a report to the state commission means that Brad's racing career is over. Brad promises that he'll beat this because he never loses. So now we have two riders in a row whose main gimmick is, I want to win the thing. Again, I really hate to be the guy that points out all these little weird things, but there's some stuff that happens that's just too weird to ignore. Brad storms out of the trailer and smacks his truck in frustration. But just before he gets to the truck, we hear a soft voice go, "Brad Barrett?" Brad doesn't react at all, and then Zabiax walks up. But his voice sounds different than the voice that we heard. It's like they dubbed someone in asking Brad's name, but why? Here's where we begin to see the really interesting thing about the people that Zabiax is picking to be the Earth Riders. Incisor was a rich kid, but had a martial arts background. Camo, well, he was a martial arts fighter. Brad Barrett is not a fighter, but Zabiax is bending over backwards to get him to join up. Why? We'll get to that.
Suspense.
Zabiax mockingly asks how the race went and then says he heard what happened. When Brad says that he just heard what happened, how would this guy have heard about it? Zabiax takes off a rather nifty cowboy hat and showcases a little video. The security video of the guy messing with Joe's bike. who turns towards the camera and shows that it's not Brad. Brad thinks he's being blackmailed for money, but no. That's not what Xaviax is after. You see, he runs a little tournament called Battle Club. No rules, no referees. Kind of like life that way. If Brad can win the tournament, he'll get the video that clears his name and gets his racing career back. If he loses, well, he doesn't want to lose. And I thought that was a really nice touch, since in the previous episode, Brad said that he was never told what happens when you lose. Brad says he's not a fighter. Again, we're going to get to it. But Xaviax says if he wants to keep racing, he's going to have to fight. He threatens to start with Xaviax, who backs off, and Strike leaps in. But worry not, it's just a demonstration of the power of the rider suits as Strike fights off a couple of summoned gel newts. Brad reluctantly accepts the thrust deck. And nothing really comes of this flashback but exposition as we return to the present and Brad is just kind of staring into space.
That was a great scene.
Actually might have used that one a second too soon. We see Grace muttering to herself, worrying about Maya, and then Trent just says that where Maya likely is, the police probably wouldn't be able to help. It's just weird to me that this subplot about them being worried about Maya has carried on so long when Maya has been safe and on Earth for over an episode now. Okay, I'm sorry, but again with the apartment complex. Look at this shot. This is not an apartment complex. Look at the size of the place. Maybe this is some kind of warehouse? I'll say one thing, if this is an apartment complex, most of the apartments don't have windows.
Okay, dude, calm down. Take a chill pill.
Kit and Maya help Len into Kit's apartment, leaving the front door standing wide open, by the way, and lay him on the couch. Kit beats himself up about not realizing Drew's trick sooner, but soon has a question, and here we are. It actually didn't take too long to get to this point. Why does Xaviax have to trick people into becoming Kamen Riders? Why not just hire the biggest, meanest criminals out there and give them the decks? Wouldn't that be easier?
That's not how it works.
Len gets up and pulls a photograph out of his wallet, handing it to Maya. It's a picture of Len and Kit, and an interesting rider-looking person down in the corner, but it's going to be a hot minute until we get to them. Kit says he doesn't remember taking this picture, and Len says that's because he didn't.
What are you talking about?
It's a picture of Len and Adam, the Ventaran Kamen Rider Dragon Knight. The Advent decks are DNA locked to a single person only. Xaviax may have the decks, but he can only give them to the Ventaran Riders, mirror twins on Earth. You know, that kind of paints the idea of Ventara as more of an alternate reality than another world, but interesting. Kit points out a possible flaw in this premise. He'd never seen Xaviax before he became Dragon Knight. He wasn't given the deck with the promise of whatever he wanted. He found the deck sitting on his apartment counter. Len tells him that Xaviax is somehow involved with him getting that deck. They hear the mirror shimmers and Len tries to get up to go, but he's too injured, allowing Kit to go alone. Brad calls Charlie. I don't think Xaviax gave his alias at the start of this one, saying Battle Club was a rush and he wants to fight more, this time trying a different rider. Xaviax tells him to stick to Wing Knight, his assigned opponent for this round, but Brad drives off on his motorcycle before he hears that. Xaviax is an extremely quotable villain, and this is a prime example. Ah! Whatever moron gave humans free will? Dragon Knight enters a restaurant, finding one gel newt. One. As a reminder, this would be like the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers rushing to an attack site and finding a single putty. It puts up a pretty good fight, though, until Thrust shows up. Thrust wants Dragon Knight to fight him, but keeps defending him from the gel newt, which runs away. Kit chases after it, which Thrust finds interesting. This really seems to be just burning up some Ryuki footage, because Kit chases the gel newt into an entirely different time of day and location, halfway up a flight of stairs. They fight, and since there's no Zordon in this universe with his escalation rule, Kit final vents a grunt. He jokingly comments that he seems to work better alone. Very good and interesting villain scene here. Zabiax is telling Drew off for venting Camo and trying to vent Dragon Knight. Drew doesn't back down, insisting that Zabiax trust him. Zabiax isn't sold, saying that sure, he had his doubts about Camo, that's not a big deal, but insisting that nobody touches Dragon Knight until Wing Knight is taken care of. Very interesting line in the sand there. Drew insists that he wasn't going to vent Dragon Knight. He was trying to distract Wing Knight so he could vent him, really showing absolutely no fear of Zabiax. He fires on top of that Zabiax sending Camo in was a mistake. He had Kit completely fooled until Camo showed up and Kit started putting the pieces together. Zabiax is forced to admit that, yes, that was an error. He should have saved Camo until Drew failed. Drew says that he's not going to fail, and Zabiax says he can still be the King of Earth. But there is competition for that spot. After Drew leaves, Strike approaches, and Zabiax orders him to keep an eye on Drew. But, also to enjoy his evening. Strike says he's looking forward to it. It does demonstrate a negative character trait, which I'm going to touch on later, but I have to admit that I still kind of love this because it was just really funny. Maya goes running into Grace's bookstore asking if she missed him, with absolutely no thought to the fact that she's been gone for nearly a day. Grace and Trent get on her for this, Grace guilting her into agreeing to close up the bookstore that night for making her worry so much. After Grace leaves, Trent asks her what really happened, but she says she'll explain later. For now, just worried that she missed her meeting. Trent, annoyed, says the guy that she's meeting is directly behind her. Credit where credit is due. I didn't notice this at first, so I backed the episode up, and indeed, the man is sitting in a chair right by the counter, and Maya runs in directly past him. It's so easy for shows like this to slip those people in after the fact and not notice that they weren't actually there to begin with. He introduces himself to Maya as James, JTC. He asks if she's ready to go, but now she has to stay and close up the bookstore. He says they can have their meeting another time, but she asks him to wait and shoots a look over at Trent. Trent says that he has people coming over to his place tonight. Yeah, to play Dungeons and Dragons, she says. Before me and my level 16 Hobgoblin Ranger Barbarian Zahn could get the first S in "Screw you, Maya" out of our mouths, Trent goes, yeah, they're still people. Yes! Yes! Maya thinks, and then says that they can have their meeting right there at the bookstore as long as James is okay with takeout Chinese, which he says he lives on. Meanwhile, Kit visits his father in the hospital, this time with his father in a wheelchair in some sort of a lounge room, maybe watching TV. Kit opines that as soon as he figures something out about life, it seems to change. That's kind of how life is, Kit. Who gave him the deck? His dad? Zabiax? He says that Len told him that there is no cure for his dad, and now that Drew has been proven to be a liar, it's all hopeless anyway. That's when his dad turns to him and says there is a cure. He's just not looking for it in the right place. Kit asks where to look, but then we see that his dad didn't actually say this and is still unresponsive. Back with the, let's just call it what it is, date, JTC shows Maya pictures of yet another Kamen Rider, a pink one. She almost says, that's a Kamen Rider. but catches herself and asks what that is. JTC, who says he got these pictures off of an FBI computer that he hacked, says even the feds don't know. The only information on the pictures is that they were taken over the last month near Gramercy Heights, a real LA neighborhood in the South section. What's more, since Pink Dude showed up, 0 disappearances in Gramercy Heights. The dude's been on patrol, fighting the monsters. Maya says that means he's a good guy then. JTC says he can assume that all he wants, but she's a reporter and she can get to the truth. She asks why come to her? A very valid question, but he says that he's read her blog post and she seems legit, like she's actually looking for the truth. He also gently touches her hand and tells her to call him James. Ooh. At the hospital, Kit has fallen asleep when he hears the mirror shimmers, waking up and promising he'll find his dad a cure and leaving. We actually follow Thrust to the fight instead, taking on, I don't know, maybe a squid monster. Kit does show up, running in to help. The fight choreography from Ryuki really serves the story well here, as the two riders are both fighting the monster, but not really working together, since Thrust's main motivation is just to fight Dragon Knight. We actually get to see Thrust's final vent, and hey, he actually used it against a monster, as a rhino creature charges in, and then Thrust stands horizontally on its shoulders like a big rhino horn, and they charge in and attack the monster. Brad then starts attacking Kit, wanting answers about what's really going on. Kit doesn't really seem to know what Brad is talking about in general, to his dissatisfaction. James, hey, if Maya can call him that, then so can I, dang it, leaves the bookstore, offering a little more explanation on coming to Maya, that so many people are after him, that she's one of the few people that he can actually trust. He also drops a very cryptic statement, saying a new age is coming, and people like them are going to make it happen. I adore the way this episode ends. James gets onto his motorcycle, which actually on this show, even that is a pretty big hint. As he tilts onto the bike, the camera tilts, setting everything askew. He looks into his left mirror, smiles, and says everything has been set into motion. In the mirror is Xaviax, who says, "Well done, Kamen Rider Strike. Let's deal the cards." Episode 10, Battle Club. Pros, oh, what a tangled web we weave. JTC's twist is set up well, and the intrigue of Xaviax's setup. Cons, really? A single gel newt? Strangely under-focused on Kit, and Maya's self-absorbed nature. It really feels like this is the point where the show's wheels hit the ground. Battle Club gets 4.75 cards out of 5. I think one reason that I love this show better than a good number of Power Ranger seasons is the complexity of the writing. The intrigue with Xaviax's plots to fool people, more on that later. The various writers and their motivations. We add into it this time the Ventaran mirror double thing, which adds complexity to Len's relationships. JTC and learning his twist. Give me more, give me more. Let's talk about a couple of those things I just mentioned. Drew was a twist we saw coming from the beginning, mainly because they pretty much told us directly from the beginning. However, while having seen the show before, so I knew who Strike was from the very beginning, I can definitely see why I would have been surprised the first time around. There are only very subtle hints to it, and I actually think that Drew's character plays into the JTC twist. JTC can't be Strike, an evil rider. Drew's an evil rider, and he's a jerk. But JTC seems to be really nice and to care about good things. It's just played so well. Xaviax is just such a wonderfully, amazingly written and performed character, and this is a prime example. For the first time, we see Xaviax backed into a position where he needs a rider whose Earth counterpart is not a fighter. So he thinks up a very complex scheme to get that person into a position where he needs Xaviax's help. We also see his frustration because us humans have that pesky free will and all, and overall he's just so smart and devious. And I have mentioned that Xaviax is one of my favorite tokusatsu villains, right? It feels like there were so many plot threads weaving around in this episode and a lot of kind of talky plot setup scenes, so they realized they needed another fight to balance this episode out, but that they didn't have one. I mean, we've got this fight where Dragon Knight takes on a single gel newt, and it's a little more difficult than you'd expect, and Thrust is in it, so I guess we can use that. There is a monster later in the episode, but was that the first time in the Ryuki episode that the monster showed up? I just found it really weird to have a full standard monster fight all the way up to a final vent, and the contract monster dragon eating the little ball of light, which I didn't mention, against a single grunt. This sure was a fun episode of Kamen Rider Wing Knight, Kamen Rider Thrust, Kamen Rider Strike Maya. Of all the storylines, Kit's was the most minor. Helps Len, learns about the duplicates, has a fight, goes to see his dad, has another fight. It's kind of a good thing for the show to spread the focus around. There's actually a very heavy plot point way later in the series that's going to touch on that. But in the moment, it's just weird for the show to not be focusing on its title character. I will admit to not thinking about this until I was trying to find a third con, but it is a thing. Maya is the show's female lead character, and up to this point, she's had some pretty redeeming qualities. She does in this episode as well, but got two big strikes in the self-absorbed column. The first was running into the bookstore looking for JTC without even taking a second to think that people would be worried that she was missing. You directly ignored a call from Trent. Don't pretend like you didn't realize people might be worried about you. The other was implying that Trent's D&D game wasn't as important as her date. Yes, okay, with the Rider stuff you could maybe make that argument, but it was really nice to see Trent not back down since, yeah, us D&D nerds are people too. Coming back to review this show, after a few episodes, I found myself actually a little bit concerned. I know this show is great, but after those couple of episodes, I found it for what I knew of its quality and kind of a middle-of-the-road run. Was the show as good as I remembered? Now the rubber has hit the road and we're getting the really good stuff. And this is only episode 10. Let's see if more is in store in the 11th episode of Kamen Rider Dragon Knight, Vent or Be Vented. Brad figures out he has been tricked, and Drew tries to convince him to keep fighting Wing Knight. Maya attempts to lure out the mystery Kamen Rider by having Trent dress up as a monster and pretend to attack Lacey. That's going to do it for another Kamen Rider Dragon Knight episode review. Thank you, heroes, so much, as always, for watching. Now that the video's done, you can let me know what you thought of this episode down in the comments below. And if you liked it, let me know by hitting that thumbs up button while you're down there in the comments. Until next time, heroes, may the power of the cards protect you. 2. Watching the footage. This is clearly footage... And Brad's winning... Brad Barrett? And then he doesn't react. Actually, might have used that one a second too soon, as Kit beefs himself up about and an interesting looking writing. Kate goes to see his dad, has another fight.